It starts with a feeling that something doesn't add up, a kind of tension you can feel in your chest before anyone even finishes the sentence. Because when people start saying Brock Purdy looks Super Bowl ready and every single voice on a national panel lines up behind it, you know something deeper is happening. This isn't hype for clicks. This isn't empty optimism. This is the kind of collective confidence that usually only shows up right before a team breaks the league or exposes everyone who doubted them. And that's what makes this moment so dangerous for the rest of the NFL. Because while everyone else is arguing about quarterbacks, injuries, contracts, and futures, the San Francisco 49ers are quietly reminding everyone what dominance actually looks like. They're not begging for attention. They're taking it. They're not scrambling for identity. They're imposing it. And the scariest part is they're doing it while still not whole, while still missing stars, while still absorbing injuries that would bury most teams. That's why this conversation hits so hard, because it isn't about potential anymore. It's about inevitability. When analysts stop debating whether you're good and start asking who can stop you, that's when the league shifts. And right now, that shift is happening in real time. The Bears are coming in with hope, with a young quarterback trying to carve his name into relevance, and yet the entire conversation feels like a warning siren. Not because Chicago can't play, but because San Francisco looks like a machine that's figured itself out at exactly the wrong time for everyone else. This isn't hype built on fantasy. It's built on production, resilience, and a level of execution that makes even great teams feel small. And when people start saying things like, they haven't even had to punt, or they're winning without their stars, that's when the rest of the league should start paying very close attention. And that's where this story truly begins, because what we're watching right now is the collision of belief and reality. The conversation started with debate, with predictions, with that familiar back and forth of who's overrated and who's not. But it quickly turned into something much heavier. The idea that Brock Purdy, once dismissed as a system quarterback, is now being discussed as the engine of a Super Bowl-ready machine. The idea that the 49ers, battered and bruised, missing names like Fred Warner and Nick Bosa, are somehow playing their best football anyway. And the idea that the Bears, led by a young and electrifying Caleb Williams, might be walking into a storm they're not fully prepared for. That's why this game suddenly matters so much more than a regular season matchup. It's a referendum on belief, development, and whether momentum can overpower talent gaps. And before we go any further, if you're locked into this conversation, if you want to stay ahead of where the league is actually heading, instead of reacting after the fact, go ahead and tap that subscribe button and drop a like, because this is where the real conversations live, the ones that don't wait for the headlines to tell them what to think. Now let's break this down, because what the panel laid out goes far beyond a simple game preview. It starts with Brock Purdy and the fact that he's being slept on, despite doing something that should be impossible, in today's NFL. This team hasn't punted in December. Let that sit for a second. Not against weak competition, not in shootouts where defense disappears, but in meaningful games where execution matters. They're averaging over 30 points a game, dominating time of possession, and controlling tempo like a veteran championship squad. And they're doing it without key defensive stars, without full continuity, and without excuses. That's what makes this so dangerous. This isn't a hot streak built on luck. It's structure, it's coaching, it's adaptability, and it's a quarterback who understands exactly what his role is and executes it without ego. The conversation around Purdy has always been unfair. He doesn't look the part for some people. He wasn't drafted high. He doesn't rely on highlight throws every series. But what he does do is win, process information quickly, and avoid the mistakes that sink teams in January. And now, with the offense humming, with weapons returning, and with Kyle Shanahan orchestrating this thing like a chess grandmaster, the league is being forced to confront a reality it's been avoiding. This team is built to win in January. They can run, they can throw, they can control the clock, they can survive injuries, and most importantly, they don't panic. That's why the conversation about the Bears becomes so fascinating. Caleb Williams has flashed brilliance. There's no denying that. He's made throws that make you lean forward in your seat. He's shown poise in late-game situations that veterans struggle with. But this matchup is a different animal. This is a defense that understands leverage, that disguises coverages, that forces quarterbacks to earn every inch. And while Caleb's growth is real, this is the kind of game that tests whether growth turns into consistency. The panel made it clear that while the Bears have tools, while they can run the ball and try to exploit certain weaknesses, this is not an easy assignment. This is a measuring stick game. A game that tells you not just who you are, but who you aren't yet. And then there's the injury context, which makes San Francisco's position even more impressive. Missing stars, rotating pieces, and still maintaining dominance is not normal. It speaks to culture. It speaks to preparation. It speaks to a locker room that understands its identity. That's why the comparison to other teams struggling with injuries feels so sharp. Plenty of teams lose one or two key players and collapse. The 49ers absorb it and keep moving. That's championship DNA. And when you add the possibility of getting key contributors back at the right moment, the ceiling only rises. What makes this entire discussion hit harder is the contrast with what's happening elsewhere in the league. You hear about teams debating whether to tear things down, whether to trade stars, whether to rebuild or reload. You hear about uncertainty, about contracts, about futures in question. And then you look at San Francisco and see clarity. Not perfection, but clarity. A clear identity, a clear plan, a clear belief. That's why the panel's confidence doesn't feel exaggerated. It feels earned. Even the conversation around other teams, like the Chiefs and the Cowboys, reinforces this point. You hear about legacy players possibly nearing the end. You hear about teams wrestling with whether to hold on or move on. You hear about uncertainty and transition. And in that context, the 49ers feel like the opposite. They feel stable. They feel dangerous. They feel like a team peaking at exactly the right time. And then there's the psychological edge. The idea that this team could potentially stay home through the playoffs. That matters. That changes everything. Travel fatigue disappears. Preparation sharpens. The margin for error widens just enough to be lethal. And when you pair that with a quarterback who's not trying to do too much, with an offense that takes what's given, with a defense that bends but doesn't break, you get a formula that wins in January. The most telling part of the entire discussion is how little panic there is around San Francisco. No one is scrambling to fix them. No one is talking about drastic changes. The conversation is about how to slow them down, not how to save them. That's the ultimate compliment in this league. And for the Bears, that's the challenge. They're stepping into a storm not because they're bad, but because their opponent is operating on another level right now. This isn't about disrespecting Chicago or crowning San Francisco prematurely. It's about recognizing momentum when it's real. It's about acknowledging that some teams grow over the course of a season and some reveal their ceiling. Right now, the 49ers look like a team still climbing. And when that happens, the rest of the league has no choice but to react. So when you hear the unanimous confidence, when you hear analysts lining up behind the same prediction, understand that it's not laziness or groupthink. It's recognition. Recognition of a team that has answered every question thrown at it. Recognition of a quarterback who no longer needs to prove he belongs. Recognition of a system that turns adversity into advantage. And recognition that right now, the road to the Super Bowl might run straight through Santa Clara. That's what makes this moment so compelling. Because we're not talking about what might happen someday. We're talking about what's happening right now. And if this trajectory continues, the rest of the league is going to have to do more than prepare. They're going to have to survive.